Hey YouTube, Mrs. CP here. Today I am canning some pork. And I decided to do this video because my mom has been asking me questions about canning meats. Because growing up she always canned tomatoes and salsa and stuff like that, but she's never canned meats. So I wanted to do a quick little video. I'm going to do this step by step by step. So even, yes you mom, yeah you, I'm talking to you mom, can't mess this up. So I brought out some examples. And basically, if you can can pork, you can can chicken, you can can, this is beef cubes. The only difference between like the chicken and beef cubes and the pork is my ground beef. I can it differently. I don't cook any of my like chicken and my cubed beef and my pork. I raw pack that, but my ground beef, I do cook first. I brown it first, and I was doing it the traditional way. I think it's this one, where a lot of people they'll cook the ground beef and then they'll actually fill it with like beef broth or water, which is great, but I don't like the texture of it. It just something about it I don't like the texture of it. So I started actually dry packing my ground beef, which basically after I cook it, I completely drain it and then I put it in the pressure can. But these are just some examples. So like I said, the pork that I'm doing, it's basically the same thing for chicken and like cubed beef. Ground beef is a different story, and I don't need to can any ground beef right now. I have a ton of it, so maybe later this summer I'll do a video on ground beef. Some other things you're gonna need is canning salt. You don't have to use canning salt, but if you're gonna just use store-bought regular salt, make sure it is non-iodized. You do not want iodized salt when you're canning anything, just because it will actually eat away at your canning lids. And you're gonna need, I got new toys. I'm so excited because I just got this the other day. You're gonna need a jar lifter. I love this one because it's spring loaded. How cool is that? I know, it's the little things in life. You're gonna need, you don't need a funnel, but it makes it easier for cleanup around your rims. And look, this one's got like the headspace already on it, which is awesome. And then a lid lifter. It's got a little magnet at the bottom where you just pop your lids out of the boiling water. That way you're not burning your fingers. And then optional are like different spices. Like the pork today, I'm going to be doing two different batches. One is going to be a barbecued pork, so I'm going to be using barbecue seasoning. And the other one's going to be like a taco seasoning pork, so we can do like pork tacos and things like that. And I love doing canned meats because it's cheaper than buying store-bought meats. You know what's in it, and it's convenience factor. Everyone knows anything that makes my life easier and saves me time, I am all for it. Yes, I'll spend probably half the day to most of the day canning this meat, but when it comes to making dinner, all I gotta do is go grab it, throw it in the pan, heat it up, and it's ready to eat. Because once you pressure can everything becomes fully cooked inside the jar. And you don't need to add water because, as you see, the juices from the meat actually fill your jar up with liquid. So I'm going to get some of this stuff moved out of the way. I've had my jars, and this is another thing. Growing up, my mom, we didn't have a dishwasher in our kitchen. We had one in our basement. So whenever my mom wanted to can anything, she would literally drag this dishwasher up into the kitchen and somehow hook it up into the kitchen sink. I don't know how she did it, but that's what she would do when she would can. Well, guess what, Mom? I'm not using my dishwasher to sterilize my jars. I've already rinsed them out with warm soapy water to make sure they're clean, and I've popped them in the oven at 220 degrees, and they've been in there for about 45 minutes while I was cutting up all my meat. And when you cut your meat up, you want to do it in kind of uniform squares. I'm not going to touch it because I just washed my hands because I got to get my jars out. But you want to make sure they're in uniform squares, and you want to try to get as much of the fat off as possible, just because the fat, that's what's going to go rancid before your meat is your fat. So you want to try to get as much of the fat off as possible. So let me get some of this stuff moved out of the way. I'll get my canning jars and we'll show you the next step. Okay guys, so I am canning with pint-sized jars today. And when I got my jars out, the first thing I did was make sure there was no chips or cracks on the jars at all. Some people do this step differently. I like to put my salt and my spices in first before I put the meat in. Some people put the meat in and then they put their spices in. I just like doing it this way because I've noticed that like when I do my chicken, I'll put like a bouillon cube in there with it. But if I put it on top of the meat, there's usually like some chunks of the bouillon still left in there, and the same with any of the seasonings, and I just totally dropped my measuring spoon. So let me find my little measuring spoon. But I'm gonna put a half a teaspoon of canning salt in to all my jars. And then I'm going to put a half a teaspoon of my, because this one I'm doing my barbecue seasoning, so I'm going to put a half teaspoon of that. This, I'm using a 1/4 teaspoon because I just dropped my half a teaspoon measuring spoon. And I think it's under the kitchen island. So I just grabbed this one. So I'm going to do 5 of those. And like I said, you can put any spices or anything you want, how you like it. Everyone's got like their own preference on what they like. Mr. CP likes really hot and spicy stuff. Me, not so much. The only thing I can really tolerate that's spicy is my mom's chili. I don't know why. But like, you're literally sweating while you're eating her chili. Then once you get your spices in, all you gotta do is fill up your jars. And you want to kind of get it smushed in as much as possible. Get as much of the air space out. I usually do this with wide mouth canning jars, but I didn't have any more left. And be very careful if you're doing this with jars that were in the oven, because they get really, really hot. And I've also got my my pressure canner on the stove heating up right now, and I've got my jar lids simmering right now. Actually, I think they're getting ready to come to a boil, so let me turn that down. But I'm going to get these 5 jars filled up, and I will bring you back when I'm getting ready to put them in the canner. Okay, so I've got all of my jars that I want to do in this batch filled. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to take a paper towel, clean paper towel, with really, really hot water and just wipe all the rims off. Because even though I use the funnel, like there's some little meat particles that could still get on there. And you want to make sure that they're just clean so they can make a really good seal. Because there's nothing worse than canning, spending all day canning, and your jars don't seal. And then all you're basically going to do is you want to put your lids on without sticking your hand in the water. And you want to put them down finger tight. You don't want them too tight. You just want them just tight enough so they'll stay closed. Some meat chunk. Alright, let me get my lids on and I will take you over to the canner. Okay, so I've had my pressure canner heating up for about a half hour or so. And I'm just going to place my jars down into the canner. I can put more than 6 in here, so I might go ahead and just put my taco seasonings one in there. I try not to do them both at the same time just because it's hard to tell which is which. But for these pints, I'm going to be processing them for 75 minutes. If you're doing quarts, you want to process them for 90 minutes. I'm not quite sure off the top of my head for half pints. I generally don't hand meat anything less than a pint because it's really time consuming. And usually I'll have to do like 2 or 3 jars of the half pints when I'm cooking. So I'm going to go ahead and do my tacos, and I think I'll just mark the tops of them so I know which is which, and I'll bring you right back. Okay guys, so I've got all my cans in my pressure canner. Yes, I am pressure canning on a glass top stove. I did it at my old house, I've done it at this house, and I've never had any problems with it whatsoever. My only tip is Once you fill it with water, you want to place it down onto your stove where you know you're going to be able to see your temperature gauge. Don't try to slide it on the stove because then you'll scratch your stove up. But once you get it placed, if you have to adjust it, pick it up, then put it back down. But I've never had any problems. My stovetop looks absolutely perfect with the canning that I do, and I usually pressure can probably about once a week. So if you're using an All-American without the gasket, you want to make sure you either use olive oil or Vaseline, and you're going to want to put it all over the lip of your pressure canner on the inside right here and right here. And then, I don't know if you can see it, but I have a little notch right here that I'm going to match up with this little arrow that's right here on my lid. And when you're closing it up, you want to go in opposite corners and tighten them down. I don't know if you guys can see that or not. Okay. I got a new tripod, so I'm still trying to figure out how to use this as well as the new camera. And then once you've got them all up, just go back around and make sure they're all tight. Now, like I said, I'm going to pressure can these for 75 minutes. If you've never pressure canned, it doesn't mean put them in the jar, set your timer for 75 minutes. I've got my heat up on high right now so it can come to pressure, and I'm going to wait for steam to start coming out of this little valve right here. Once steam starts coming out of this valve, I'm actually going to let it steam for 10 minutes. And that's just getting all of the air out of the pressure canner. Each pressure canner is different on how long you have to let it steam for. Check your instruction manual to see how long you have to let your steam. I just always do 10 minutes. So once it starts steaming, I will bring you back. Okay, so my pressure canner has started to vent. I don't know if you guys can see the steam, but there's steam coming out, and it's a constant steam. It's just not a spitter. It's got to be a constant steam that's coming out. So I'm going to set my timer for 10 minutes. And when that goes off, I'll bring you back. Okay guys, so my pressure canner has been venting for about 10 minutes. Timer's about to go off. In my canner, I have a weight like this. And it's got 15 pounds, 10 pounds, and 5 pounds. And with my altitude, I'm going to be canning at 10 pounds of pressure today. You want to check to make sure if you're at different elevations, what weight you should be using for your can. So, now that my timer's up, I'm going to place my weight on. And I'm not going to start my time yet. I'm going to wait until this gauge gets all the way to 10 pounds, and then I will start my timer. So when I get to 10 pounds of pressure, I will bring you back. Okay guys, my pressure canner has reached 10 pounds of pressure, so now is when I'm going to start my timer. Like I said, I'm going to be pressure canning these for 75 minutes because they are pint jars. And at this point, I can actually turn my stove down a little bit. Now, when you're doing the canning, you want to keep an eye on this gauge, come back and check it periodically, because if it drops down to below 10 pounds of pressure, you're going to have to start your entire process over as far as timing goes. You can't just bring it back up to pressure and keep on going for the 75 minutes. You're going to have to go all the way back to minute 1 and recan for another 75 minutes. So it is very crucial that you check to make sure your pressure gauge does not drop below 75 or below 10 pounds of pressure. So I'm going to go ahead and let this do its thing, and I will bring you back when it is time. Oops, sorry. When it's time to do the next step. Okay guys, so my pressure canner has been going for 75 minutes, so now all I'm going to do is turn off the oven or the stove. That's all I'm going to do. I'm not going to touch anything else. A lot of people would be tempted to take the weight and lift it off and put it back down, lift it off and put it back down to try to bring the pressure down quicker. You do not want to do that. That's like one of the biggest mistakes people do, because you do not want your pressure canner to lose pressure too fast, because that will cause your jars to burst. So I'm just going to let it sit here and let it come down to 0 pressure on its own and just leave it alone. So when it gets down to 0 pressure down here on the pressure gauge, I will bring you back. Okay guys, it's that time. My pressure canner has gone down to 0 pounds of pressure. So now I'm going to open up my pressure canner. And same way with the way that you closed it, you're going to want it out without burning yourself. Take your brackets off from across each other. Hurt. Before I open that, I'm gonna actually want to take my weight off, and it's hot, so it's got a little bit of fuzz left in there. Did I just say fuzz? It's steam. You guys know what I meant. So I'm just gonna wait until it's kind of stops. Even though it's at 0, there's still a little bit of steam left in there. Waiting. I can actually still hear the jars boiling in there. So I've got it all done. Even if you have a Presto, I would not recommend touching the canner with your hands. And when you open it, you always want to open it away from you so you don't get burned by the steam. Now I have a dish rag that I've laid out on my countertop. I think I'm just going to let them sit in here and cool off for a little bit, so when I take them out of the pressure canner, I will bring you back so you can show it. But you can see, let's see if I can zoom you guys in. They are boiling inside still. Even though the pressure canner is off and there's no pressure, and they'll probably boil for a good 30-45 minutes inside the jar. And as you can see, they're also filled with liquid now. They didn't have any liquid in when I started, but now there's liquid. So once I am ready to bring them out of the pressure canner, I will bring you back. And I'm just going to start listening for the great little pings that you hear. If you've never canned before, the ping is like the most exciting sound you hear when you can, because it means that your jars are sealing, you did everything right, and nothing's going to go for waste because everything turned out great. So I'll bring you back once the jars have cooled down a little bit. Okay guys, so I've let my cans cool just a bit. So now I've started to hear them ping, so I'm just gonna bring them out and put them on the dish towel. Now, I'm not gonna touch these for at least 24 hours. And after they sat for 24 hours, I will take the bands off and I will wash the jars just to get any residue off, and then label them and stick them in my pantry. But that is basically it for canning meats. It took me about 3 hours from start to finish, and that's including cutting up because I bought one big huge pork tenderloin, so I had to cut all that up and remove all the fat off of it. So about 3 hours from start to finish, and in between chasing after a 3-year-old. So if you don't have a 3-year-old to chase around, you can probably get it done a little bit quicker. But that's what I have for you today, so be sure to subscribe and follow us on Facebook, and happy prepping. Isn't that pretty? So, so pretty.